So, good morning, everyone. I am Melody Odonusus together with Miss Kayla Melandicho. We will be tackling about week number 8, which is inductive learning. So, the lesson outcomes for this lesson is that to plan a lesson that allows the student to inductively learn a concept. So, did you know that in our contemporary society, teachers are discouraged to spoon feed information? Instead, teachers are to provide opportunities for students to discover on their own. So, one way of doing this is doing is through inductive learning. So, by the inductive learning or discovery learning, the student will learn effectively by providing examples. So, what is inductive learning? So, inductive learning, or sometimes we call it discovery learning. It is based on the principle of induction. So induction means to derive a concept. So by showing that if it's true to some cases, then it is true for all. So this is a contrast to deduction where a concept is established by logically providing what is true based on generally known facts. So, in the inductive learning lesson, a teacher is designed to facilitate an activities to guide the learners on discovering a rule. So, for example, the activity might involve in this inductive learning is comparing and contrasting, grouping and labeling, and finding a pattern. So, di ba, kadalasan kinagapangita man taog mga examples para makuha na to ang answer. So, like in the mathematics classes, so the learner will engage in inductive learning. So, when they observe examples, so they will looking for a patterns if giunsa na siya pagkuha and naga-compare po na sila. So, there are four processes that student will go through when they doing an inductive learning activity. First is to observe, second is to hypothesize, third is to collect evidence, and lastly is to generalize. So first, let's talk about the observe. So children love looking for a pattern. So when given them a lot of examples, they will look for similarities and assume a rule. So the key is to give them examples to observe. So these examples will be well thought of so that the student would eventually arrive at a complete rule. So, for instance, if you want your student to discover the rule in multiplying by powers of 10, it is better to use the examples in set B than those in set A. So, in the both sets that had been shown in the PowerPoint, set A and set B, so the student will lead to discover the technique in multiplying by 10. So it is a pleasing a zero after the number being multiplied. So, however, the variety of examples in set B allows the student to establish that the rule works even when exchanging 10 and the other factor. Like for example, in 18 multiplied by 10 equals 180. So, if the other factor ends with a 0, so that the 0 is not neglected. So, like for example, in set B, in 40 multiplied by 10. So, in set B, allows the student to have more comprehensive understanding of the rule. Next is the hypothesize. So, in this, in the student will form a rules in their mind so as they observe. So in this stage, encourage the student to share their thought. Assure them that there are no wrong hypotheses. So dapat i-acknowledge na to ang different variety of hypothesis sa mga student and ideas. Pero dapat na to pero dapat streamline na to. So later on, the unique hypothesis to test their unique hypothesis. So next is to collect evidence. So here the student would test their hypothesis. So How? By how? So by applying their hypothesis to other examples. So if there are more than one hypothesis generated by the class, so it did intentionally give a counter example for them to test. So lastly is to generalize. So finally, so the student would now formalize their hypothesis to a rule to support the student so that they would use the mathematical term in stating the rule. So by doing this, they would develop their mathematical vocabulary and therefore their overall mathematical communication skills. So so in this lesson, so that plan on the next page. So take note that the plan only shows the develop of the lesson, so which involves the inductive learning strategy, and the other parts are not included. So in this lesson, inductive learning was not used to discover a rule, but rather to discover a relationship. Now, I will give the floor to Miss Kayla May Landicho to tackle about multiplication and division as inverse operations in grade level 2. That's
Good day everyone, I am Kayla May Aflanicho and I'm going to discuss to you about the multiplication and division as inverse operation in grade level 2. So the target learning competency of this lesson is by the end of the lesson, the students will be able to describe the multiplication and division as inverse operation. So when we say multiplication and division as inverse operation, this means that multiplication undoes the division and the division undoes the multiplication. So sa Bisaya pa, ang inverse kay kabaliktaran. So for example, 3 times 2 is equals to 6. So ang iyang inverse operation man kay division, so we need to start the 6 which is the quotient. 6 i-divide siya sa first factor which is the 3. 6 divided by 3 is equals to 2. So inana ang multiplication and division as inverse operation. So there are 4 processes in inductive learning activity. Those are the observe, hypothesize, collect evidence, and generalize. So the first is the observe. So you or we as a teacher ask the students to fill in the blanks by dividing or multiplying. Kanyang mga examples nga nasa inyong atubangan, mo na yung ipa-answer first sa inyong mga estudyante. So, 12 divided by 2 is equals to 6. 6 times 2 is equals to 12. 15 divided by 3 is equals to 5. 5 times 3 is equals to 15. 24 divided by 6 is equals to 4. 4 times 6 is equals to 24. 36 divided by 4 is equals to 9. 9 times 4 is equals to 36. And after they all answered the pair of multiplication and division number sentences, give the students a time to observe the examples that were given. Fast learners may become too excited to share their hypothesis, but we as a teacher, we do not allow them to spill it dayon kay ang atong goal as a teacher kay makuha ang aha moment sa atong mga estudyante. So next is hypothesize. Struggling students may not see the pattern right away. Help them by focusing their attention to the quotient and the first factor. In this part, kay challenging kani siya nga part sa mga students, labi na sa mga slow learners. And as our job, we need to help them and give a hint na mag-focus sila sa quotient and sa first factor sa number sentence. And after that, maka-formulate na sila og hypothesis or maka-realize na sila og unsaon to siya. Maong bago sila makabuhat og hypothesis, they need to undergo first of observation. So, next is call some students to explain the hypothesis After each explanation, ask who has the same hypothesis. Diri kay tan-awan nimo kung unsa bay parehong kung naa bay parehong hypothesis nga gibuhat ang estudyante nga nagapasabot that they understand the pattern. So next is collect evidence. Apply the hypothesis to each example to see if they always work. Dili kay ang students mangolekta og ebidensya para masuportahan ang ilang hypothesis para mapakongkrete nila ang ilang idea about sa topic. And paghuman kay mag-ask sa mga students or pwede volunteer nga students nga i-apply ang ilang hypothesis na gibuhat nga i-apply ang ilang gihatag para ma-proof nga tama ang ilang gibuhat nga hypothesis. So next is generalized. Based on the result of the collect evidence stage, ask the students which hypothesis is true for all. Then instruct the students to write using their own words the rule in their notebook. Diri ang apart kay timan-an nila kung unsa ang gamiton nga pattern or process nga true for all. Then sa pagsulat sa rule sa ilang notebook, dapat sila tanan ang magsulat para dili magkadumulaag ang formula or ang hypothesis or ilahang hypothesis. Dapat mo arrive gyud sila hypothesis nga true sa tanan. Moong gitawag siya og generalized kay naa na diha tanan. So, have 2 to 3 students to read aloud what they have written. Bali diri nimo mabal-an as a teacher kung nasabtan ba gyud sa mga estudyante unsa ang rule or pattern nga dapat gamiton para sa tanan. That's all. Thank you for listening.